So what type of questions do you guys usually ask on this thing?
It depends of the person. Like I got into like a stalker mode, and I just go through everyone.
Holy
So I went to your Instagram, to your LinkedIn, if you see like the view there.
Oh god.
And also, well, Gerardo showed me the. It's recording or? Oh, the
Holy crap, man.
So to finish, Gerardo showed me your film a long time ago, and I rewatched it last time, and I just found it so complex. Like the characters are so complex, and I saw in the description that it's based on your grandparents' story. So I just wanna ask you, like, how has family shaped the artist that you have become?
Definitely. So for me, everything that I create is kind of based on my relationship with my family growing up. So, or just experiences in general. And I think that is the case for most filmmakers. For me, I grew up with my grandparents, very closely with them. And that I think has shaped me into the person that I am today. I'm very traditional. I'm sure that, I don't know, but I think that I'm not very similar to most people that have just grown up with their parents. I'm very more traditional. And that's kind of the lens that I work with when making films. I never want to make a film anything past the year 2000. I don't want a shot of like a cell phone or a laptop or like a text message or an email being sent. I think that's boring. And I think filmmaking should be shown directly through a character-driven story. Very character-driven. Show it and tell it, but more show, don't tell. And I think nowadays technology is kind of getting in the way of really showing a true story and relationship for the characters in that story. And yeah, sorry guys, I'm a bit nervous. I need to breathe.
Oh no, relax. Okay. Yeah, and also I saw you have like a background in psychology.
Yeah.
How has that contributed to your like filmmaking, especially now that you're talking about like the characters and how it's important for you to have a character-driven story?
Yeah, so I think for me, I've always been very passionate about mental health. When I was in high school, something that I struggled with a lot was my own mental health. I had an eating disorder, I struggled with addictions, and this was during the time that I was also a really big movie buff. I loved movies and storytelling throughout my whole life. So it's always been kind of like the mental health field and storytelling. And I watched a lot of films throughout my life about characters struggling with mental health. And some of them do it really well, but some of them don't do it so well, especially short films that I've watched that have come out in modern years, like in the 2010s. They don't really do it too well, or they show it in a really obvious way where if somebody has OCD, for example, like comparing it to La Luna, my short film, if somebody has OCD and you watch that in a short film, they're opening and closing a doorknob like 10 times. They're cleaning something in the house like a million times over and over and over. And I think that's a really stupid way of showing it. I'm not saying stupid in the sense that people don't struggle with that. I think you shouldn't show it in a literal way like that because that's not how it is for people everyday life. I grew up with a lot of people in my family with OCD, and what they struggle with on an everyday basis are little idiosyncrasies and tics or ways of doing things that have just been ingrained in them for so long, right? Or just things that you might see around the house that are indicative of the mental illness that they're struggling in. So with, for example, for La Luna, Thomas, who is the main character that we see in that film, and I'm sure if anybody has like sort of like intuition while watching that, they can kind of tell that he's struggling with some sort of like mental illness, but maybe you can't really pinpoint it on the spot. And that's supposed to be the case because people are not always going to be showing that full force. You know what I mean? That's not going to be the basis of their personality. People are based off of layers, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm sitting here next to you, you might not even be able to tell what I struggle with or what I have. I can't even tell what you struggle with or what you have if you did struggle with a mental illness, right? So I kind of wanted to put it like that. Like Thomas is a person, Thomas has layers. He's not just his OCD, right? But even when we're watching him in his house alone, like a fly on the wall, he is somebody that is still a person. Even though you're alone and you can bring out more of yourself, you still have layers. You have dichotomy as a person, right? And I think that's really important to see. And in the film, you can see that he has plastic on the couch, right?
Yeah.
That's one clue right there. Number 2, he gets frustrated about a lot of small things. Number 3, he cancels reservations even though that they still have time to get ready. Number 4, he's like obsessed about chess. He really wants to finish this chess game in the amount of time before they leave for the restaurant, right? Or even like when Rosa comes in and she's commenting that he has to wash the outside of a banana peel before he eats it. You know, just little things like that. I like to show it in that way. That's more encompassing a person's everyday life, little things that they do, rather, or things that they say when they talk to you that show the way that they think and feel, rather than showing somebody cleaning a counter over and over like 15 times, right?
Yeah.
So
What did it mean to write like about your grandparents as a family member, and of course like as complex characters and all these layers?
of course. So basically, my grandparents came to Canada as immigrants and they lived a very hard life. But I didn't really want to write a story to show their life. I kind of wanted to write a story to show their relationship, but more as a second generation Italian couple. So their first generation coming to Canada, I want to show it as second generation as a couple in the 80s rather than a couple in like the 50s. Because when I make films, I don't like to show the true situation that happened, because that is, in my case with my grandparents, was a very tragic and terrifying situation that they lived in. And I'm not saying to other filmmakers that they should or shouldn't tell that story in that way. It's just for me, I like to write stories for what could have been. I love writing a lot of those stories. And I think a good way to relate it to is like La La Land, for example. But I don't like to like do that heartbreaking thing in the end. I like to like kind of have like the happy ending in the end of like, the real story was tragic. Here's what could have been. And I'm rewriting the story for them as a homage as what could have been, right? I try to go forward with love all the time. But going back to more about the story, sorry, I kind of go into tangents a lot here.
No worries, it's your face.
Appreciate it. So Thomas and Rosa are based off of my grandparents, which is Carmen Cariati and Elvira Cariati. And Thomas, my grandfather, Carmen, actually, I'll start with that, was a very harsh, very abusive husband. He treated my grandmother terribly, and my grandmother was a very reclusive, more reserved to herself woman. Not out of choice, of course. So the way that I changed the story and turned it around was that I watered down my grandfather. Like, even though Thomas is still pretty, like, you know, harsh and rude in the short film, I watered him down a lot. And I watered up my grandmother a lot as well to kind of have that more of like a fiery, assertive energy to her. And that's kind of the way of the story, just showing kind of like a snippet of the day in their life. But I wanted to make it in a way that the dialogue showed a lot about their history from what they were saying, the things that they were complaining about, the things that they're frustrated about, really show how dynamic their relationship is and what has been going on for a really long time. You can see, at least I think, you can really see the frustration in both of them, right?
Yeah.
And the whole point of the story is, the thing that my grandfather struggled with a lot was never really seeing the bigger picture. He was always stuck on little things throughout his time, things that he was frustrated about, things not going the way that he wanted, him being stuck in situations that he wasn't happy with, you know, even moving to Canada that early or getting married that early. That's not things that he wanted, but he was pressured by societal, in their inner societal pressures. Family pressured him to do that. And, you know, that's kind of like what I wanted to show, not like in terms of like the societal or family pressure, but that this guy is not completely happy with his situation. Even like you can tell like with him getting the house, like there being like sprinklers. Obviously this house was not built as a house before it was something else. Normal houses do not have sprinklers on the ceiling. So this man is very frustrated about the life that he's living in, and his current situation, what he's dealing with, and how it's affecting his relationship. And then in the end, he finally is struck with, I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but in the end, he's finally struck with something that he can't control, something he literally can't control or fix. He can't fix anymore. And he has to look at himself in the mirror at that point and just surrender and given to the situation, let go, and just look at it with humor and laughter and light at the end, and just go forward with Rosa with love, and just be happy in that moment and just enjoy it, because that's what life is. You can't fix or control things. You just have to enjoy the moments as best as you can.
Oh, yeah, that's totally true. Is there any particular scene that was hard to write?
Hard to write. Oh gosh. Well, I would say the whole story for me was hard to write, because a lot of people actually have complimented me on how intelligently the story was written. Because if you do not watch the story and pay attention to it directly, you're probably not going to understand it. You're probably not going to, like at the end, like somebody was like, I like the rain, dude. And I was like, dude, it's not rain. I was like, were you not paying attention to the story? So it's just little things like that. When I write stories, I try to not take people for idiots. I try to write very intelligently. Very similar to one of my favorite writers is Charlie Kaufman, and I get inspired by him a lot. But in terms of the most difficult scene to write, I would say probably the first half of the story where Thomas is just sitting down with himself, because I didn't want to get that wrong, or I wanted to get it just right to really show, I guess, a person sitting alone with their thoughts, their own devices. That's literally a line from the film itself right there. But a person sitting alone with their thoughts and devices, and what that does. Like, think about you when you're sitting alone and you're stressed, whether that's because of a mental illness or just things that have happened in the day. What do you look like in that moment? And that's what I really wanted to show. And what if you did have OCD, and if you did have an obsessive way of thinking, what would you do in that moment if nobody was watching you, if your wife wasn't watching you, and you were just free to just like express your frustrations? So that's really what I wanted to show, and that was really difficult to write. Originally, the film La Luna was actually supposed to be one person sitting alone the whole time, very similar to I think Christopher Nolan's first short film that he did, Doodlebug. I think it's called Doodlebug. But it was supposed to be very similar to that, where somebody's just alone in their apartment and they're kind of like freaking out, or we're watching this person kind of freak out. And then I was like, but that's not really based off of anything passionate in my own life. That's not really based off of anything. It's just me kind of writing like Taxi Driver, but a guy alone in a room, not a cab, right? Sorry. But that's what originally it was going to be. And then I was like, this is too dark. This is too dark of a film. And right now with my first short film, I don't want to make a dark film. I want to make something that's based in light and love. So then I looked at it and I was like, who's this character similar to that I know in my life, or that I've known in my life? And then my grandfather came directly into my head, and I was like, okay. So then I'll just take this character and write my grandfather. And then I was like, wait a second. Well, this character, I don't have to just make it one person because it's a short film. I'm like, this character, what if he had a wife? What if some character like this, who is very much struggling, who has like sick ways of thinking, has a wife? What would that look like in a relationship? And how would that affect a relationship? So then Rosa came in, and then I guess things got a little bit easier to write there. But the first half was definitely very difficult to write. Like anything to write where it's like a one-man show is very difficult, and it's extremely difficult to cast for, because you need someone that can hold the audience based off of their emotions and how they just present themselves, emote, right? So that was difficult. And then I would say, in terms of shooting, I would say the last scene was definitely the most difficult to shoot. Yeah, for sure.
Has written about like your family show you something about yourself that you didn't know?
I think the most interesting thing about that is that every single character that you write is a part of you, even if you're writing it based off of somebody else, right? So even though those characters, Thomas and Rosa in my short film, were based off of my grandparents, the dialogue came from me, right? The dialogue came from me, the way that the characters express their emotions in a specific line of thinking or a very specific, like starting off from like one emotion to the next emotion to the next emotion. That's me picking that, right? And that's me writing that. That's coming from somewhere inside of my brain, somewhere inside of Monica. And I think that's one of the most crazy things is at the end of the script, when you look at it, you're like, holy crap, this is a part of me. Traits of these characters are a part of me. And I will say I think it's a beautiful thing, but it's also a very strange and weird thing at the exact same time, right? Yeah.
Well, if someone were to tell a story about you one day, what would you hope they get right?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. A story about me. Is this a question that you have?
Actually, yeah.
Oh my gosh. These are good questions. A story about me. I would say they would need to follow me around for a while. Maybe some interviews, not like this in front of the camera, but interviews just like maybe at home, me in my pajamas, things like that. Really follow me around for a while, see the ways that I do things, see the ways that I get into trouble in ways that I don't even expect. Um, just little scenarios of chaos throughout the day. Like on the way here today, I was gonna take the subway, but I searched up the directions right when I got to Union Station off the train. And I was like, oh, holy crap, 30 minutes? I was like, oh God, I gotta take an Uber. This isn't gonna work. So I was like, okay, I'll order the Uber. So I ordered the Uber. Then the Uber said it was there at Union Station. I got out and I actually tripped on nothing in the middle of the street. So this way I lost. Yeah, right? So just like looking at things like that, like, is she clumsy? Is she a little bit like weird? Which these are things that I do consider myself to be, but people are very unique and beautiful, and I would just say if they were gonna write a film about me, to try to know as much about me as possible in doing that. And what would the film even be about? That's crazy. Like about me, like a biography, or like a film of like a character like me in it.
Whatever you.
Whenever I want. Yeah. That's crazy. Um, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question.
No worries at all.
Yeah.
And how did you see yourself in the future?
How do I see myself in the future just in
What would you
film?
like to do?
I the big plan is to have a production company, and not like an online production company that's incorporated that we see a lot of nowadays. Again, I'm very old school, and I'm not saying I don't want my company to have a website. It definitely needs to have a website. Every company should have a website. Don't not have a website. But what I think is that I want a physical unit of space where we can have equipment to be rented out, where we can have props to be rented out, costumes, consulting for people in the film industry, even like a part of that, like a specific unit where we can help people, show like them different resources if they're struggling, maybe even mental health resources to people in the community, stuff like that. I want a big physical unit of a production company, headquarters where people can work, people can do what they love. We can help people get jobs in the industry because that's very difficult. Yeah. That's what I want. I want a production company above all other production companies that help people, maybe even a nonprofit working within that production company, to help filmmakers make films and also grow their career path. Yeah, that's what I want. That's the end goal. But while I'm doing that and being a business owner on the side, I really want to be a producer, so a line producer, a production manager, and work to make feature films, films that are successful and not low budget. So, yeah, so I want to do that. I also want to be a screenwriter to write feature films and write for TV series, and still do story editing on the side. I do enjoy that. I feel like that's a very meditative thing that I enjoy doing. It keeps me calm, and it's work that you can do from anywhere, right? So,
What was the last film that you saw that you felt like completely undone?
oh my gosh. I would have to say probably the film Here. So it's Here, and it came out actually last year in 2024. And the director is Robert Zemeckis. And I love him so much because he makes so many films about time in general. Back to the Future, which I also love, one of my favorite films. But in this film, he it's basically shot in one room, the entire film. It's a house, and it's only one part of the house that's shot, which is the living room. And I think that's so interesting because we do so many things in a living room. We have people together there, Christmas trees go up, you're in front of the fire, you're listening to music, you're watching TV, right? There's so many things that happen in a living room that you can show. And it shows different families or different periods of time. There's even cave people, there's indigenous people that they show in that spot where the house would be in the future, and showing, I guess, how trauma is so generational, and even that a house or a specific place has a vibration. So even like before a house is even put into the spot, what happened before there? I think history is very, very something that's very impactful and is long lasting, not just in the sense of it being written in the books, but it has a vibration. It's remembered. It's a spot that's there in time, and that meaning will always still be there, and new meaning will go on top of that, right? I'm not too sure if like anybody listening is like religious or spiritual, but I am definitely a little bit spiritual, and I do believe that. But it shows generational trauma. It shows how I guess you can be affected by vibrational history, and then it also shows how we're all getting older. And a line that I from the film, but I see myself saying a lot in my life, and especially to my partner, this film is very impactful to him too, is like, oh, we haven't traveled, but I really want to travel eventually. And, I really want to.
Italy?
No, I haven't.
Would you like to?
I would love to go to Italy. So even just saying stuff like that, like, oh yeah, like, specifically, he's like, we should go visit my grandfather. He lives in Manitoba. That's not too far. It's Canada, right? And we've been saying that for like 5 years, right? And you just keep putting things off and putting things off because life gets busy and life gets stressful, and you're focusing on your career, or you have goals or things that you really want to focus on in order to achieve, the next stage of your life, right? Or planning for the future for the different things and aspirations that you want to achieve, right? So I think that's like a big thing. And the film shows that how this couple, this son that was living in this house, which is played by Tom Hanks, he was going to be an artist. He was going to be an illustrator. That's what he wanted to do. And then his girlfriend at the time, fresh out of high school, said, I'm pregnant. And so then she moved in with his family in that house. And then he couldn't go to school for illustration. He had to get a job. So he went into advertising and sales like his father. So again, that like generational trauma, because at the time in the 60s, sales was like a really big thing, right? So he went into sales. He was working to make money. And then, there's struggles with work. You don't get a promotion, stuff like that. And they were basically stuck in that house for their whole life. The wife was very upset. She wanted to move out and have a space of their own. And they kept putting it off, like next year, next year, next year. She wanted to go to Paris. She wanted to go to Paris and travel. She never went to Paris and traveled. And there's this one incredible scene on her birthday. I think she's 50. It's her 50th birthday. And she comes home and everyone yells, surprise. And then she comes closer to the frame of the camera, and then her husband brings a cake out with like lots of candles. I think maybe 50 candles or something like that. And so then she's like, wow, like this is so nice. And then her being excited about the moment then turns into, she's like, I can't believe I'm 50 years old. And she's like, it was like yesterday I was just 25. And if I looked at 50, I would have thought that's like so many years away. Like, and now it's like I blinked and like I'm 50 years old. And she's like, and I never got to do this, and I never got to do this. I never got to go to law school to become a lawyer, different things like that. And then she starts, it's very emotional. She starts crying. And I think that's a scene that a lot of people can relate to, who have just been kind of thrown in like either like not bad cards but like very specific situation that's difficult to get out of, whether it's financial, if you're struck by finances, or you're struck with having to take care of a family, or if you just have other extenuating strings or circumstances that are keeping you stuck, right? So it's that film really shook me to my core. And I do recommend everybody, literally, I think every single person should watch that because it reminds you not to waste time. This is your only life that you have. You got to do what you want to do. And I think that's honestly one of the reasons why I chose to go into film, because for me, I did study psychology for 2 years, like you mentioned before. And then at a certain point, I was like, even though I love psychology and I do want to help people, I love film more. And I can still help people with that. So I might as well just do the thing that's more riskier, because now as the economy is getting really, really bad, it's a risk for any position that you're in, regardless of what industry it is, right? And we see now like therapists, doctors, lab technicians, people that went to school for medicine, and apparently these jobs are so needed, still cannot find jobs in the field that they studied after like 10 years of going to post-secondary education, right?
Yeah.
So
Talking about like generational trauma, do you think that we inherit more than our genes, like conflicts, dreams, and how hard do you think is to break that?
So I think that I think everybody has generational trauma. I think it's very, very strong. And I don't know though if it's stronger than the trauma that you obtain in your own life.
Yeah,
I'm not too sure. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know if anybody has the answers to that.
yeah, it just came out to me when you were talking because there is some
Yeah.
generations and
I think that I definitely see the patterns though, even if you're even if you're very, very intelligent when it comes to your own emotional health and the trauma that you have picked up since you were a kid, and you do shadow work, trauma work, parts work. I think all of those things are very, very important. Even if you've done that, you cannot pick up on everything. There's no way you can pick up on everything. If you do ayahuasca, all that stuff, there's no way you can pick up on everything. But I think you can get close. It's good to be aware, but that's tricky. I definitely do see the patterns, even things that I've broken up in my own life, because my mom is a narcissist and I grew up with her, and I do see little things that even in terms of the way that she looked at her career, I do follow the same sort of pattern that she did with that, right? Even though that I've made sure not to obtain the toxic traits of narcissism because I've had years and years of therapy, I do still see myself being similar to her. And sometimes that can be a little bit scary.
Yeah.
But it's not bad qualities that I'm similar to her. So at least that's good. But
carried the good.
exactly, yeah. And even my grandparents, I see myself very similar to my grandmother, not Rose's character, but like how she was in actual real life, where sometimes I can feel a little bit defeated by life, especially the industry and how it is nowadays. It's really, really difficult. So sometimes I fall into that a little bit too. So I think it's just really important to look at that. Past that, I don't know my great grandparents and how they were, what they were struggling with. That was like the war era, so I'm not too sure about that, but that time was a little different. But in terms of emotions and feelings, I don't know. That's such an interesting and complex question to think about. Yeah.
What is the thing you are the proudest of?
Oh, wow. I would say probably getting to a point in my career in filmmaking, I have become extremely resourceful. So even on social media, every single day, if not every other day or a couple times throughout the week, I am posting different resources on my social media for other people to help people in the film industry, job opportunities, stuff like that. And I've even created a spreadsheet for myself of the different job applications that are coming up, different funding resources, grants, tax credit resources, stuff like that. Because I think that people aren't aware of that. Even though we went to film school, the people that I know went to film school, they'll be interested in being a crew member, but they really want to direct and write, but they just give up on that and they go towards being a gaffer or a grip or, just even like sound or editing. And those things are great. I'm not saying that they're not passionate about those things, but what they really want to do is write and direct. And you can write and direct and you can even produce. It's just you need to know the resources that are around you to make that easier, right? You need to know that you don't have to be working for 3 years at some minimum wage job, trying to save up all this money or doing crowdfunding and failing because you don't know how to market properly. You can go to the government and try to apply to funding. You can go to smaller companies, nonprofit organizations that are having, a grant that they're putting out for somebody to try to win or to apply to. There's so many different resources. You just have to really keep your eye out. You have to do your research. And yeah, because in film school, we had one course, which was taught by Amelia, who I have a lot of respect for at Toronto Film School. She taught, budgeting and scheduling. And that was the most important course. That taught all the regulations for the unions, that taught all the funding bodies, that taught us about tax credits, that taught us about micro budget sheets, telefilm, and how that's the standard budget to use in the industry. But that's just one course. And if you just learn one course, you're going to forget some things. Even if you're someone like me who loved that knowledge and wrote it down, you're going to forget some things. So you have to take that knowledge and go further within, do your own research continuously. So I think that's the thing that I'm most proudest of myself, is that I am very resourceful. And even though that I'm afraid, I'm extremely afraid. I don't know if I seem like a person that is afraid, but I'm extremely afraid of just doing interviews like this. Or meeting up with people and picking their brains. That's something that I was doing for a really, really long time, was meeting with producers, high-level producers in their career, and just asking them all the questions of how did they get to where they started from to where they are now? What are the mistakes that they made? What are the answers? Please tell me the answers. And every single meeting I had, they're like, there's no answers, man.
Wow.
There are no answers. There are different strategies and there are things that can help, but there are no answers. So I think that's the thing that I want to provide to people is, here are some maybe micro answers, but not like the clue. There's no clue. But I think that's also what I'm proud of, circling back, is that I'm extremely afraid, but I swallow it up and I just do it anyways. And I would say that's probably the thing that I could thank my mom for the most, is that she was very much like that. She was like, whatever you're feeling, just do it anyways. Yeah. It's okay if you're afraid, even while you're doing it. You're doing it. I'm here in this moment. Whatever anxiety I had about coming on and being interviewed, I'm still here and I'm doing it. Yeah. That's the point.
Wow. Thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate it. Really, you are such an amazing human. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it as well.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for coming.